afternoon, everyone. My name's York. I will be today's host. Welcome to the webinar, New Friends and Old Friends. Today's topic is how to craft outstanding college essays. As we all know, the college essay is playing more important parts, even more today compared to we used to. And today we have our speaker will be Miss Calla, who is a
Everyone.
senior education consultant. Yes. Yeah, next slide, please. Before we jump into the webinar, I'd like to use some couple minutes to introduce our company and about what we do here. Harmony Plus is our international learning ecosystem. We are here in the Silicon Valley, and our goal is to upgrade education. Through our hybrid learning model, we leverage both in-person and online resources. We empower our students with the skills they need to adopt and excel, and not only helping the school, but their career and later life. Next slide, please. About our hybrid learning platform, we do education and we do services. We have the top teachers. And also we got a lot of endorsement from the leading universities, and it's worth to mention that we are the official partner with UC Berkeley, San Jose State, and SRI. We teach our students a theory and lesson practice. So students will gain advantage and enjoy continuous improvement. Those our students have been admitted to, like all the big names, UC Berkeley, Yale, Stanford. We just don't have enough room to put out the names. Yes, I want to make it short so you can have more time with Calla. I know you guys have a tons of questions. Let me introduce our speaker today. Ms. Calla is our Chief of Staff, a Senior Education Consultant, also the FLA and EATSE Program Manager. She helped hundreds of students gain admission to their dream universities. She is holding the Master of Art degree in East Asian Studies from Stanford, full scholarship, which is big thing. And Bachelor of Art degree in Germany, Chinese, and East Asian Studies from UW-Madison, triple major. So before I hand the mic to Calla, I just want you guys to know, if you have any questions during the webinar, you can use the chat box, and we will have a Q&A section by the end of the webinar, and your question will be answered if we have the time, okay? So feel free to use the chat box. Now, Calla, you have the mic.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction, York. Okay, so here's our agenda for today. We're going to cover a lot of topics related to college essays. So first, we'll just talk about the general importance. After that, we'll talk about some different college essay types, because there are a lot, actually. Then we'll talk about a few common worries about writing essays and kind of how to dispel some of these fears. Then I'll share some tips. I'll also provide a little information about discussing COVID-19 in essays. I know people are getting vaccinated now, and it kind of seems like the pandemic is coming to an end. But for a lot of students applying this year, you know, COVID was like kind of the big thing that happened during their high school career, right? So it's still important to talk about that, especially if your family had a special circumstance. And then, you know, how to get started with writing college essays. So that's what we're going to cover today. Okay, so essays are actually of the utmost importance these days. So why is that? Well, you know, they've always been important, but they're even more important now because of COVID-19. Now, as I just said, you know, things are getting a lot better with the pandemic situation, but this was a really big deal for students who are applying to college this year, because that was like really a big thing that happened during their high school career. COVID-19 really impacted students in a number of ways. For instance, students might have one or more semesters where they kind of had an impact on pursuing higher GPA. So quite a few schools did pass or no pass. So maybe some students who didn't do as well in the beginning of high school who were hoping to improve their GPA later on, but then COVID hit, they didn't really have a chance to pursue that higher GPA because of COVID. Another really big thing So a lot of students haven't really been able to show their academic achievement through standardized tests because a lot of schools are going test optional and even test blind. So the UCs are test blind. So just a quick refresher, I know we've talked a lot about different testing policies in these webinars. So test optional means that a university will consider your standardized test scores like the SAT or ACT if you send them, but it's not required. So with test optional, it's usually in your best interest to send your scores if you have a good score. Now, what is a good score? Well, it really depends on the school, and that's a good conversation to have with your college consultant to kind of have a strategy for that, but we won't get into that right now because it's about essays. Then test blind means the school will not even consider your SAT or ACT or other standardized test score. Even if you send it, they're just not going to look at it all. They're not going to consider it. Okay, so like the UCs are probably the most famous example of test blind schools these days. So really a far cry from the previous situation when SAT, ACT, the standardized tests were really important. So now essays and extracurriculars and your GPA are really going to fill that void, but essays will definitely play a big part. Okay, and then the third way that COVID-19 has impacted the application process. So of course, because of the pandemic, a lot of students couldn't participate in extracurricular opportunities during the summer or school year. So maybe students weren't able to advance as high, like get on varsity for as many years in their sport, for instance, or do as many top summer programs in their field of interest. So, even though the pandemic is getting a lot better these days, there's still a lot of negative impacts of COVID-19 that affected students and are kind of still affecting their college applications as you look at their whole high school career. So that's why essays are really important even this year. Okay, so how can you use your essays to stand out? Well, the goal is to create a unique portrait of the student. And of course, better essays deliver better admissions results. Okay, so what is unique? Well, of course, that's a very broadly defined term. I'll definitely share some examples throughout this essay, or sorry, throughout this webinar. But for instance, certain students have had certain life events that really make them stand out. For instance, one of my students wrote his personal statement about how he got hit by a car and had a 5% chance of survival and got his lung removed when he was 10 years old. Okay, now that is an example of a very unique story. And if you've had some sort of life experience like that, you should certainly share it, especially if it has affected your worldview a lot or it affected the rest of your life. Maybe you couldn't do certain things because of that. So that's definitely a great thing to talk about. But there's certainly other good topics as well that we'll get into a little bit later if you haven't had such a life-changing event like that. Okay, so really important to use essays to stand out, because these days a lot of students have really high SAT scores, really high GPAs, well over 4.0 with all of those weighted AP courses and college courses. So essays are really how you can stand out. Okay, so we have some different college essay types. So the Common App personal essay is probably the most famous one. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. But I'll let you guys know what the coalition application personal statement is. Then we'll delve into the UC essays a little bit. Then we'll give you some examples for writing supplements for individual colleges. And then we'll talk about writing supplements for some special programs and majors, and also additional information essays at the very end of this section. Okay, so that personal essay on the Common App. So this is the kind of the most daunting one that students are always stressing about the most. So this is the one essay that's distributed to all colleges on the Common App. So in this, you have 7 essay prompts to choose from, and I have those on the next slide so we can take a look at that. So out of these 7, you'll only respond to 1 prompt. And then the maximum length for this will be 650 words. So some students feel like, oh, 650 words, that's a lot, it's a few paragraphs. But actually considering that this is, your big chance to shine, and for some schools, this will be the only essay that you send through a common application, you'll soon realize that 650 words is actually kind of a challenge to tell everything you want to say to those admissions officers. So a lot of students actually need to cut down their essay from like 1,000 words to 650. I've definitely helped a lot of students do that. So you need to be very concise, basically. So the purpose of this kind of personal essay is to reveal the student's unique character, experiences, interests, and strengths. Okay, so here are the prompts for the Common App personal essay. And actually, there was a slight change this year that I want to let you guys know about. So that would be number 4. So new prompt for number 4. So this new one this year is reflect on something that someone has done for you that has made you happy or thankful in a surprising way. How has this gratitude affected or motivated you? Okay, so when I was reading the Common App blog, they said they made this change because they really wanted students to reflect more and really think about like gratitude, especially because of the pandemic. A lot of people were being a little more reflective and thoughtful about certain things. So I think this is a great change. So certainly in our essay boot camps and in our future planning program with students, we'll definitely use this as one of the options for the personal app essay and have a strategy for talking about this. Okay, so we have a wide variety of prompts, as you guys can see. However, I always like to point out number 7. So 7 is share an essay on any topic of your choice. It can be one you've already written, one that responds to a different prompt, or one of your own design. So for many students, it's a little more straightforward to choose one of these prompts and then use the prompt kind of as guidance as you write your personal statement. But the 7th prompt here kind of lets you submit whatever you want, basically. That would be relevant for admissions officers. Of course, you don't want to submit any random essay, but you can certainly have some creative license here. Okay, so that's why it's nice to have number 7 as well. And actually, that's why sometimes we can adapt different essays. If students start out with the UC essays, for instance, and write those, and then we can adapt one of those to the Common App personal statement. And sometimes when you do that kind of adapting, the essays don't totally fall under one of these other prompts. So number 7 is always a good one. Okay, so now the personal essay for the Coalition app. So to be honest, this is kind of similar to the Common App essays. This one again is one that you write and then it's distributed to all colleges on the Coalition application. On the Coalition app, you have 5 essay prompts to choose from and you only choose one. Usually the recommended length is a little bit shorter than the Common App, so this would be 500 to 550 words. However, a lot of students have their Common App and Coalition app personal essays be the same. Usually students will just reduce the word count a bit on their Common App because that 5th essay prompt for the Coalition app is kind of similar to prompt number 7 that I showed you guys here. So it's kind of an open-ended one. So you can be pretty flexible. And again, the same purpose. So really showing your unique character, experiences, interests, and strengths. Okay, then we have some personal insight questions. And these are on the UC application. So these are 4 short essays distributed to all colleges being applied to in the UC system. So you need to write 4 essays, but you do have 8 insight questions to choose from. And students will choose the 4 that provided the most well-rounded snapshot of who you are. So the usual strategy for the UC essays is to tell one main story in each of these 4 essays, probably in different areas of your life, or really focusing on those stories or aspects of yourself that you want to share in your UC application. And then together, that combination of those 4 essays can give a really good snapshot of who you are. And these essays are a bit shorter, so maybe 4 essays, wow, sounds like a lot. But actually, each one is only 350 words. 350 words is just 2 or 3 paragraphs at the most for most students. So, again, really not a whole lot, even though it might seem like a lot at first. So here, the purpose is kind of similar to those personal essays, those longer ones for the Common App and Coalition app. So still showing the students' unique character, experiences, interests, and strengths, but in 4 distinct ways. And then we have the Why School essay. So for quite a few schools on the Common App, especially, this will be required for many schools. However, not all of them. So when writing a Why School essay, research is very, very important. Okay, so you should really research the college's academics and campus offerings before writing. So for instance, if you decided to apply to a certain school because they have a very special program, maybe like they have a bachelor's in neuroscience, not all schools have that. So that'd be a very compelling reason to write in the why school essay. You know, your school has this very interesting program. Okay, in this kind of essay, you really want to demonstrate specific knowledge of and passion for the school you're applying to. So how do you do this? Well, definitely avoid shallow statements. I'm pretty sure every university has great professors and a beautiful campus. I haven't really been to any universities that have terrible professors and an ugly campus, okay? So be specific. You know, it's like that unique NeuroX program, perhaps. And maybe they have a special AI bachelor's degree program. That's also something many colleges do not have. Maybe it's located in a history-rich city. So if you're going to mention geography, mention something like pretty specific, like why you like that. Okay, so once again, in the purpose here, so really demonstrate those specific offerings that really match your interests and ambitions. Okay, then we have why major essay or you know, whatever area of academic interest that you have. So this is also a requirement for quite a few of those Common App schools. So this really illustrates exposure to and passion for whatever subject you're interested in. So your major and academic interests should definitely align with the school's or with the student's high school profile. Okay, so what's the high school profile? Like the activities that students have done, their like academic, GPA, or like what courses they were taking at school. So many of those things should align with what kind of major you want to do in the future. So here's the thing. With this, some students might ask, well, you know, honestly, I'm pursuing something completely new, or I don't really have much of a background in that area, even though that's what I want to study. Then you should really explain why. Okay, so like, for instance, maybe a student always thought they wanted to be a doctor, but then they did a summer program and then they realized, you know, the blood and guts weren't really for them. And actually they want to do computer science, but they only took like AP Computer Science A in school. So it might be good to kind of share that narrative, or at least for part of it in that why major essay. And also another thing that people might be worried about, you know, what if you're undecided? What if you don't have a major? Well, you don't necessarily have to declare a major to respond well to this prompt. If you are in that undecided camp, what you do need is to describe what academic subjects excite you. Okay, so then you can kind of say that you're exploring these different areas and explain why. What you should definitely do, no matter what, is research those specific majors at the college before writing, especially if you're attracted to that school for a special program. Really show that you did your research and that you understand what it is and you really know what you're getting into, and then demonstrate that you have a bit of a background in this area, at least as much as you could, given your school context and your extracurricular context. So the purpose here is really to illustrate with specific examples a student's understanding of and passion for whatever subjects they're writing about. Now there are also some special essays for special programs and majors. So some students might do professional and pre-professional applications that often require additional essays. So what are some of these examples? Well, some students might do like a dual Bachelor of Science and MD application. So normally there'll be extra essays about why you want to pursue this. Another example would be if students are doing like a Bachelor of Fine Arts, or maybe conservatory programs in the visual or performing arts. So in these areas, you know, of course, you're going to probably submit your art portfolio. They really want to see that. Or for performing arts, probably do an audition or share a recording of previous theatrical performances. But many times for these, they will also want essays about kind of your artistic inspiration. So in the past, I've helped quite a few students do applications for art majors at top universities like UCLA, UC San Diego, and also for like specific art schools like Cal Arts. So in those types of essays, they're really going to want to know like your artistic inspiration. So maybe it sounds crazy to like do even more writing when, you know, it's art and you're already sharing your portfolio, but they just really want to know more about like your creative inspiration and why you're going this route. Also, some pre-professional undergraduate programs in areas like architecture, pharmacy, and design will also have extra essays usually. Also, if students want to pursue honors programs, Again, they'll have some sort of prompt about why you want to do this, or just getting a little more insight about the way you think about issues. And then some unusual essay prompts. So a few, especially top schools like IB plus schools, are famous for having unusual essay prompts. So these often challenge students' critical thinking skills and creativity. So here are a few examples. A really fun one that students actually love writing is the roommate essay. So Stanford has this, Harvard has had it in the past, some other schools have had it as well. So I'll read this prompt out loud. So write a note to your future roommate that reveals something about you, or that will help your roommate and us know you better. So not sure if you guys have heard, but Stanford actually has like a ton of supplemental essays. So you'll already have so many opportunities to share all about, your extracurriculars, academics, your academic passion. So this is like your opportunity to really show who you are on a personal level. And actually, one of my students in the past who actually ended up going to Johns Hopkins, so she also had to write a roommate essay for some of her applications because she was applying to top schools, and she just added so many funny quirks about herself. Like one of the quirks that she added was like, I drink exactly 10 gulps of water before I go to bed every night. Like that's like the kind of detail that you can add to these roommate essays. And colleges just love to hear that kind of stuff. They want to hear that you're a little quirky, especially like Stanford, like students who have that kind of panache and are like a bit quirky like that. Speaking of quirkiness, University of Chicago is kind of known for that as well. So they also have really interesting essay prompts. So here's U Chicago's example. You're on a voyage in the 13th century, sailing across the tempestuous seas. What if suddenly you fell off the edge of the earth? So this one requires a lot of creativity, right? This is a pretty crazy prompt. So the University of Chicago really likes students who are very witty and who are very creative. Okay, so what would you do in this scenario and why? So they want a really unique creative answer to this. It might be kind of daunting to write about this sort of thing, but a really good U Chicago essay would have some sort of creative idea, and it would still relate to yourself, especially your unique character. So show some of those character traits. Okay, and then a third example here is from Dartmouth. Okay, so we have a quote. I have no special talent, Albert Einstein once observed. I'm only passionately curious. Celebrate your curiosity. So now this one is kind of going a little more back to yourself compared to the U Chicago prompt, but it's still very open-ended. Okay, so celebrate your curiosity. So you could go many different directions for this. So again, with this type of essay, really important to brainstorm and just really think about it. Make sure you have that kind of angle, show your uniqueness and those really good character traits about yourself. So make sure that those really shine through here. Okay, so those are about some different college essay types. Now let's talk about some tips for college essay writing. Okay, so first of all, reflect your personality. Okay, so for instance, if you're a funny person, it's definitely great to show some humor in your essay. But if you're not really funny, that's okay. You don't have to be funny in these essays. There have been some really good serious essays that I've written too, especially if you're talking about kind of a serious narrative from your life. It's probably not going to be too humorous, especially if there was a lot of trouble at first, but then you showed a lot of growth. Whatever those personality traits you want to show, just really make sure that they come through. And actually a really good brainstorming exercise to reflect your personality is actually just write down a few of those adjectives that you really want to come through in your essay. Like adjectives or even certain nouns that kind of reflect your personality, like honesty, for instance. And then actually write those words down and make sure that they pop up in your essay, or at least really make sure that the stories that you're sharing in your essays really demonstrate those qualities. So actually, one way that I brainstorm with students is I have a pretty long student essay questionnaire. So it's quite a few pages. I always have students fill that out when they first start working with me, even if they're younger, like in 9th or 10th grade. And then we revisit that right when we start application season. Or if I have new students at the start of application season, we totally fill out that student essay questionnaire right at the beginning. And actually on there, I have many questions that are like, okay, what kinds of adjectives describe you? Share some of those stories. So then from that brainstorming exercise, we can pick a lot of those adjectives and personality traits and related stories, and then kind of start to develop essays around that. Another area, be genuine and show emotion. Okay, so this is another big thing. Sometimes, students really don't want to show too much negative emotion. Of course, you don't really want your essay to be negative overall. Definitely, the ending of essays should really be positive, right? But sometimes students might be talking about a really touchy topic. Maybe a student had a friend who hurt themselves, or they had a big tragedy in their lives, like a family member passed away or something like that. Well, it's okay to say that you were having some sorts of negative emotions. I mean, that's part of the human experience, right? So maybe you were, angry or frustrated or really depressed. So it's okay to really show those emotions. That's how you really show your genuinity. But the key to that is to show how you overcame these issues, whether it was fear, resentment, that grief, and how you really grew as a person because of it, and how it affected other areas of your life. So generally speaking, try to end on a positive note. Show that personal growth at the end, but towards the beginning, it's okay if there's a little bit of negative emotion. Also show some self-awareness and self-reflection. So if your essay is just all a story, not the best. So you'll definitely want to tell a bit of a story, especially towards the beginning of your essay. But then you'll want to leave a good chunk of it for that self-reflection. So really analyze the situation. Why did you take those actions? What was your thinking process? Why was the outcome the way it was? What did you learn from this? So those are important questions to ask yourself. And actually, when we're doing the essay editing process, this is a lot of what we add in. Because the easy part is to just kind of write down the narrative, right? But doing that self-reflection takes time. That's why students should not write essays in one day. Okay, so now some concerns that students might have about writing essays. So really common one right at the beginning of the process. Oh my God, I have no idea what to write. Well, if you're in this situation, what should you do? Well, we have a lot of brainstorming activities. So like I mentioned before, I have the student essay questionnaire that I have students fill out. And a lot of the questions on there really help students generate ideas for their essays. Okay, so some of the questions are what kind of adjectives describe you? How would your friends and family describe you? What was your proudest moment? What was your most challenging moment? So going through questions like these, even before looking at some of the prompts, can just really help you generate ideas and who you are as a person, what you really want to tell admissions officers. And things will definitely change in the essay editing process. That's why we have a process, of course. But it's good to brainstorm. Definitely good to think about that. So probably don't just sit down and write if you don't have too many ideas. Just write down some notes first and write things down little by little. Another strategy is read those essay prompts and just write down ideas for what you could write, whatever comes to mind. For instance, for the UC essays, you might just want to write down ideas for all 8 of those prompts, even though you're only going to choose 4 in the end. Because then you can come back a few days later and decide, okay, these are kind of the best stories. These are the best prompts. So then you can narrow things down later. So just good to do a lot of brainstorming exercises, but just reading those prompts and also writing down a lot of notes, and then taking a few days to really process everything and think about it. Okay, another big concern. So some students are like, well, I'm really not very creative. So that's okay. The main thing is your content. Of course, we want a good story well told, but most students will have some sort of interesting or unique story. For some students, we just need to dig a little more than others. And again, that's where brainstorming comes in. And also, a college advising coach or essay editing coach can also help add some of that creativity. So through conversations that you have with whoever's coaching you on your essays, they can kind of help you brainstorm some creative ideas, or also help give some suggestions for how you can maybe restructure your essay, or add some things to make it a little more creative. So a combination of maybe a little dialogue or narration, storytelling, versus really doing some self-reflection. So everyone's creative in their own way, even if they aren't officially an artist or something like that. Okay, another big concern. Nothing major has ever happened to me. So once again, that is okay as well. So there are different styles for writing essays. If students have had a pretty good life, they haven't had a lot of challenges, that's great. Great, good for you that you haven't had really bad things happen to you, to be honest. If students have been in those really tough situations, those are usually good topics to write about. But if students have not been in those situations, there are different styles for writing the personal statement. So students are probably going to have a pretty narrative essay, mostly just focusing on that one big story in their life if they have had something really major happen to them or a big challenge. If students have not been in that situation, then maybe combining a few different stories from their life and then weaving all of it together through a common theme is probably the best. For instance, some students' personal statement might be about like what career they want to do in the future, and then they'll kind of share some examples for what they're most interested in, or what kinds of things that they've been doing that are related to that major. And then it's kind of all tied together. So in those sorts of situations, might be good to kind of have those different stories from your life and connect things instead of going really deep into one event. Because if you haven't had that major of stuff happen to you, how can you really compete with those other students who have? Well, it's kind of hard not to. So that's where the structure of your essay is going to be quite different. Okay, next. I don't do a lot of activities. Yeah, so for this one, a lot of students, of course, will write about their activities in essays, but if students have not been in that situation, that they haven't been able to do a lot of activities, it's good to kind of address why, first of all. And then second of all, you can probably share some stories about other aspects of your life. Okay, so you don't necessarily have to write about your activities. For instance, one of my students in her personal statement, the main thing that she wrote about was actually her acne. So she had pretty bad acne on her face, and her personal statement was really humorous because she was at first talking about all of like the home remedies that she found on the internet and that she was like trying. She crossed the line and decided, or she decided not to pursue this anymore when it told her to put urine on her face. But, she actually did a lot of activities, but that's really not what she wrote about in her personal statement. Instead, she had like these personal stories, kind of, her feelings about her acne, and then it actually inspired her to want to study biology and then pursue her own business and having her own skincare line in the future. Okay, so there are many other things that you can write about besides your activities. So it's really finding some of those interesting stories. Okay, then another concern. So my parents want me to write about something else. Okay, and actually I'll kind of talk about this with the last one as well. It's also my friends don't like my essay. So I definitely think it's good, especially in the brainstorming process, to involve some of the other important people in your life, like your parents and friends. However, take their advice with a grain of salt, because they are not college admissions professionals. So, they're just reading your essay, but they probably haven't read hundreds of essays or even thousands of essays like many college counselors have, right? So usually the best people who can give you advice are college counselors, because they're the ones who have been doing this for many years and who have read thousands of college essays. So they know what works and what doesn't. So I think if your parents or friends don't really like your essay, I want you to write something else, I think it's good to find out why. If it's something like really personal, or they feel like it's too personal and they're kind of like embarrassed about it, that might be one thing to avoid. But if they just like don't think your topic is very good, then it might be good to bring your college counselor into that conversation. And then really kind of compare to what other students have done and what has worked in the past. Okay, now let's talk about some personal essay do's and don'ts. So when you're writing your personal essay, do make sure you highlight your unique qualities and insights about the world. Do provide specific anecdotes from your life to tell a personal story. Everyone likes stories, right? A good story well told. Do show your vulnerability and willingness to learn from your mistakes. Okay, so as I said before, it's okay to show some of those relatively negative emotions if you show how you overcame that and really learned from those. Also, make sure you share your opinions and show your independent thinking. So it's always good to include some information about your thinking process. It's also good to take some creative risks with your essay and embrace humor, creativity, and surprise, especially if that kind of fits your personality. Definitely don't shy away from this. Writing college essays is certainly very different than when you write essays for school. So they're a lot more personal in nature, as you could probably gather from the title. So feelings, creativity, stories, it's all good stuff in your essays. Now some don'ts. So do not regurgitate your resume. So really pick just one thing or a few things to highlight in your essay, in your personal statement. So really those important things that especially need to be elaborated on. So some of your activities maybe are pretty straightforward. A lot of people know about them. So those are probably best left for your resume. The good activities to talk about in your personal essay are the ones that you have like a really nice anecdote or story for. And then you can write about that, like how you maybe really impacted one person. Also, do not focus on grades and test scores unless you have a really, really unique situation. But for the vast majority of students, try to avoid this. Because for most students, there is a struggle with, getting high GPA, doing well in the SAT. So that's not very unique. So that's why it's good to avoid that. Oftentimes, students talking about this, it just really comes off as very whiny, and admissions officers don't want to hear that. Do not brag or put others down. Okay, so, show humility, even if you do have a really good accomplishment. And be positive. Try not to be negative about others at all. Don't do personal attacks in your essay. Focus on yourself. Next, do not avoid writing about your difficulties or mistakes. Okay, so it's great to talk about difficulties or mistakes. However, when you do this, the key thing is to talk about how you overcame this. If you really have not overcome this difficulty, you may want to choose a different topic, or you really need to show how you've made some progress, even if you haven't fully overcome this area. Then last but not least, do not present yourself as a cliche. So some stories are very common, especially if students are like talking about like struggle to get good grades, for instance, or kind of like a sports underdog story. Those are examples of very cliche essays. So try to have a unique angle. So like, if it was really hard at school, like why was it totally different for you than the vast majority of other students? And if you can't answer that, you need a new topic. Okay, so that was about the personal essays. Now let's talk about the UC essays. So some similar advice, but still a little bit different just because of the structure of these essays. So for the UCs, of course, do highlight your special talents and interests. Make sure you provide specific and clear anecdotes to support each of your essays. Okay, so stories are great. Specific examples, don't be generic. Do show your ability to work well with and get along with others. Do demonstrate independent thinking and growth over time. And do show humor, surprise, and creativity. And for the UC essays, you're probably going to want to get pretty close to 350 words, because as I said before, that's not a whole lot. So for a lot of students, we have to work a lot on cutting it down to 350 words because it's hard to write that concisely. You're going to want to write a lot more than that. Okay, then some UC essay don'ts. So do not ramble. Every word matters. You need to be very concise since you only have 350 words. Okay, so, and then same advice as with the personal statements. Okay, so don't focus on grades, test scores, don't brag, etc. Okay, so now a little bit about COVID-19. So as we said before, the pandemic, the situation is getting a lot better these days, but this was still a really big event for many students applying to college this year. So admissions offices are still pretty sensitive to the impact of COVID-19 on students and families. So in the additional information section, or even in your personal essay, don't worry about this and definitely share these things. So if your family income was affected by illness, or if your family situation was affected by job loss due to the pandemic, even if your even if one parent like lost their job and now they've got another job, like it definitely affected your family for like a few months, right? So try to remember those things, especially towards the beginning of the pandemic or when things were like really bad back in 2020. Definitely mention some of these things, because even if things are better now, you know, it can set you behind as a student if your family was really affected for a period of a few months. If a student has had to work or support their parents during this time, definitely mention that. Or if the students struggle to access online opportunities. Okay, so definitely share these things if you were in that situation. You know, if you weren't in that situation, it's okay. This is more just like if, you know, if you encounter a lot of issues with COVID. So here's the thing. If you were fortunate enough to have stability, resources, and access, well, admissions offices will likely recognize this. And if you have had that kind of privilege, definitely don't slack off because you think admissions will be easier for everyone. Actually, admissions offices will definitely assess your situation, and they'll definitely assess your levels of engagement. So don't just use the excuse of the pandemic for everything, especially if you still had access to most things in your life. Okay, and then some students may be selecting gap years due to the pandemic too. So if students are in that sort of situation, it's definitely important to address that and explain why, and say what you might do in that gap year or what you did in the gap year if you already took one. So this is usually good in that additional information section. So speaking of the additional information section, here is a special part about, on the Common App. So the Common App will still have an additional information section specifically for COVID-19. So they'll also have it for this year. Okay, so this is in addition to the regular additional information section. So this is just for COVID. So here are things that you can write in this section. Illness or loss within your family or support network. If there were employment or housing disruptions in your family due to the pandemic, food insecurity, toll on mental or emotional health, new obligations such as part-time work or care for siblings or family members. Okay, so this might be a big thing for quite a few of our students. Maybe like everything else was fine, but maybe just with like everyone being home, maybe they had to take care of younger siblings more. So definitely mention that. Another thing would be like the availability of the computer or internet required to continue your studies at home, especially if like multiple siblings were at home, parents were working from home. So if accessing the internet and computers was an issue, definitely mention that too, because that was an impact of COVID. Related to that, also access to a safe and quiet study space. So on this list, of course, some things are more serious than others, but definitely think about all of these different aspects. Because even though maybe access to a safe and quiet study space might seem like a very little thing compared to like a parent losing their job or someone in the family getting sick, it's still important to mention these things because it did affect studies one way or another. Okay, so you can also talk a bit about COVID in additional essays on the UC application. So there are two places to do this. So if your academic history was specifically impacted by COVID or just in general because of something, you do have a little space to talk about that. So 550 characters is not a lot at all. So you need to be very concise, like exactly what happened and why, and then done. Then after the personal insight questions, you have a lot more space to talk about COVID or anything else in addition to those personal insight questions and academic history section that you would like to add. Okay, so what specifically can you add to academic history? Well, maybe, there was a change in school environment or policies like moving to remote learning. I think the vast majority of schools did that. So you can just mention that very quickly. Definitely something to mention would be if there was a change in the grading system. So even if this happened like last year or the year before, still mention it on your application because this will still affect your overall GPA even now if your school went to pass, no pass for a semester or even longer. Then also mention if there's a change in course availability. So some electives at schools got canceled, maybe like Project Lead the Way engineering, just because of COVID, because some things it's just, you can't really do it online very easily. Or maybe there was some other like college course that would have made a student more competitive. So if you did not have the opportunity to take a certain course, definitely mention that as well, because that may have gotten you a little bit behind the original path you wanted to go on. And then just any changes in academic performance. So maybe a drop in grades due to COVID or any other personal experiences. Then after the personal insight questions, if you want to write a little more, like a longer essay, here's some ideas that you can write about related to COVID as well as other things if you want to share more information about the UCs. So maybe COVID or the social justice movement that has been happening recently impacted your choice of major. So you can definitely take some time to write about that. Maybe you had changes to your extracurriculars due to COVID. So maybe you lost opportunities or you weren't able to do certain things that you had planned on previously because of COVID. So I know a lot of schools canceled extracurriculars. So I think most students will have something to say in this area. Maybe COVID or the social justice movement impacted your decision to apply to the University of California schools. Maybe there's some organizations that interest students at the UC, so definitely mention those. Or if you just want to say how you plan to engage with the community if you're admitted to the UCs. Now, keep in mind that on the UC application, it's one application that will be sent to all of the UC schools. So you probably don't want to have a section that's just about, oh, I love all of these things at Berkeley, even if you're applying to Davis, Irvine, Santa Barbara, UCLA, etc. So still make it a little generic, more about the UC system overall. Okay, and then last but not least, a little advice. So this is the time to start writing college essays. It's kind of daunting, right? A lot of different types of essays. Where should you begin? So here's what you should start doing right now. So first of all, start early. As we know, it's a good time. First step, brainstorm or write down notes for essays. So I mentioned some strategies before. So for instance, I have students do a student essay questionnaire. I know quite a few schools, especially private ones, will have students also fill in some sort of questionnaire just with their backgrounds, and it's kind of like to give the counselor information, and also teachers might be writing recommendation letters, but also just help the students brainstorm that way as well. It's also important to read those prompts and write down notes for those, just kind of whatever pops into your mind. Take a few days to think about those. And here's another piece of advice. So make sure that you write down notes for essays whenever, wherever. So I think it's good if students have a special page on their phone, kind of where they maybe can take some notes, because actually a lot of the most brilliant ideas will happen when you're out with friends, or maybe grocery shopping or whatever. It's not going to be usually when you just sit down at your computer and focus. Oftentimes when students do that for the first time, they'll have writer's block. So make sure anytime an idea pops into your mind that might be good for your personal statement, write it down in your phone. And then you can go back to it later. Another thing, related to what I just said, so become familiar with all the prompts now. Just good to read all of them, write down a few initial notes, kind of like your first reaction to them, and then come back to them in a few days. Then the next step, after you know which prompts you want to do and what topics you want to write about, be sure to create outlines for every essay. So this will help you get a really good structure. Kind of think about how many words you want to dedicate to each part. This will help you be very concise and jam-pack as much information as possible and really maximize the space in your essay. Okay, then after you create outlines, you can start drafting. When you draft, definitely get feedback. So it's great to get feedback from your college counselor, even when you're kind of in the brainstorming stage or with that initial content. It'd also be good to talk to some parents, friends, or other people who are pretty close to you. Maybe just kind of say oh, this is kind of how I see you, or yeah, that's a good topic for your essay. So definitely good to get feedback about not only just your grammar and writing style, but also your content structure, all of that. And then edit many drafts. So good essays are not written in one night right before the deadline. Absolutely not. So the best essays will have many drafts. In the past, I think, I don't know what the record would be. I've had some students do 9 drafts of their personal statement. Others have done, 5 or 6 drafts, and that's just for the personal statement, just for one essay. Okay, so lots and lots of editing. So those students who did that really wanted their essay to be perfect. And in the end, their essays were really, really good, especially compared to the students who just did 2 or 3 drafts. So it's important to keep editing. As we like to say, iterating here, right? Design thinking, iterating with your essay. So then you can really get the perfect essay. Okay, so I already talked quite a bit. Let's talk about how Harmony Plus can help students craft those awesome essays. So first of all, we can help students in a wide variety of areas in terms of their college applications. So one area would be helping students enhance their GPA and academic performance. Okay, so providing academic support as well as having the strategy for how students can plan their high school academic career. Then we can help students plan their standardized tests and also provide some support in these areas. We provide tons of extracurricular activities, research, and leadership opportunities, and I'll show you those in just a moment. We provide a lot of college essay support. Okay, and actually, I'm one of our essay editors here, one of our essay coaches, so it's always fun to work with students. It's definitely my favorite part of the application process because that's where students can really show their personality. We can help advise students on recommendation letters, kind of who to ask, how they can approach their professors or teachers about that, etc. And then we also do interview training. So those are just a few areas in which we can help students. So now related to college essays, we are having a college essay bootcamp that's going to be happening in August. And actually, I will be the instructor. So if you want to spend more time with me, definitely sign up for this. So here are the course contents. So since we are based in California, and actually I do feel like starting with the UC essays is a good way to go because they tend to be a little easier to write than that big personal statement. We will start with the 8 UC personal insight questions, really analyzing those. Then we will talk about brainstorming, creating outlines, look at some sample essays. Then we'll write first drafts. We'll do an essay editing workshop and talk about how to create an activity list for the UCs, and that can also be adapted to the Common App and other applications. Then we'll talk about the Common App prompts and how to write a personal statement. And then we'll likely take one of the UC essays or maybe a few of them and kind of combine them for the personal statement. So that method usually works very well for students who are applying to both, which most students will do the UC application and Common App. So that's why we do things this way. Then the last session will be about polishing essays and also introduce students to supplemental and additional information essays. So if you are interested, you can scan this QR code here. And actually my colleague York will also send some information about this in the group chat. So he'll send the webpage link and also the interest form. So that's a Google form that you can fill out if you're interested, and then we'll contact you. Related to this is the College Application Preparation Bootcamp. So this focuses on everything related to the college application process besides essays. So these two boot camps really go in tandem. Okay, so the course contents for this in the 4 sessions are about finding and choosing universities, so having a good strategy for that. Then we'll go over application systems and forms. So a lot of tips for that and answering students' questions. So it's good to just get all those forms filled out right away so you don't need to worry about them like right before the deadline. Some strategies for choosing a major and looking into many different major programs maybe students didn't even know about but would be a good fit for them. And then also talking about all other application requirements. So recommendation letters, sending your test scores, how to submit your transcript, etc. So once again, scan that QR code if you're interested, and there'll be a web page in the group chat in just a moment. Okay, and then I'll just go very quickly with these future planning summer programs. So in addition to those boot camps, we also have the Future Leader Academy. So for students who want to learn more about leadership, we also have our extracurricular activity training and internship club for students who want to join some professional workshops, as well as do some projects that will enhance their resume. We also have many Business Academy summer programs. Quite a few of these have started already, but there are still a few cohorts that will be open later. So we have things from entrepreneurship to UX design to preparing for a finance competition to data science and machine learning and areas like that. We also have many reading and writing programs. So for any younger students who are in the audience, we have like creative writing, nonfiction reading and writing, playwriting. And then for students who are a little older, we have a nonfiction reading and writing cohort that's a little more advanced, as well as research writing and analytical writing for those older students. Okay, and then last but not least, we have our future planning. Okay, so what does future planning all include? Well, Future planning, the reason why we call it this is because we don't just want to help students get into a good college. That's not the end goal, right? So we really want to help students develop themselves personally, academically, as well as professionally. So we want students to get into a good college and then have a good career in the future and just have a good adult life in general. So really we want to have them or make them have like that comprehensive future planning, really set them up for success. So we do things like private school applications for K-12. For younger students who are not in their application year, we do academic and extracurricular enhancement. We do college application essay services for students in grade 12, as well as students doing college transfer, or even grad schools, so like master's, PhD, MBA, etc. And we also have one-on-one essay editing and interview training. Okay, so for younger students, the main service objective is to help students build a personalized, competitive application profile. So these are some of the things that we go over. So we have regular meetings. We do, major and career assessment, academic evaluation, help students select their school courses, give them advice for preparing for those standardized tests, plan their activities, including their summer programs, help them prepare their resume, do some research into colleges. So it's always good to plan early with that, planning college tours and other personalized services. Then when students are in their application year, the main goal is to help students package and present themselves in the best light possible to colleges. So here we have meetings as necessary. We help students have their application profile strategy. So it's very important. That really helps guide the whole application process. So we help students select a major, develop their college list, go through that whole essay writing, all the way from brainstorming to getting some writing instruction to editing multiple drafts to polishing. We help them have an early application strategy, prepare for interviews, prepare for college tours, especially when it's non-COVID, have a deferral or waitlist strategy if they're in that situation, choose the final college selection after they get those offers, and other pre-college and personalized services as necessary. Then we also have one-on-one essay editing and interview training. And we can also help with video supplement support. It's also becoming a little more common these days. So we do essay brainstorming first and outline creation meetings. Then we do essay editing. Okay, so many drafts. We can do proctored writing training, especially for private school students who are applying for those. We do interview training. We help students, prepare for interviews and do a little research on the situation about the school and whoever is interviewing them. Mock interviews as well. And then if students need to do a video supplement, we can help with script editing and also the video editing. And we always make professional plans like this, tailored for each student, just to really keep everyone on track. So we like to be very organized. Okay, so I talked a lot, getting towards the end here, so we can maybe answer a few questions. If you want to learn more just about Harmony Plus in general, and especially our webinars, definitely join our WeChat group here. So feel free to scan this. And also we have a special promotion. So thank you guys for attending. If you guys would like to review us on Google, that would be wonderful. And actually, if you do this, you can receive a $50 coupon. So if you write a review for Harmony Plus on Google, you can scan this QR code and scroll down on the left and click Write Review. After you write a review, take a picture of it and send it to info@harmonyplus.org. And once we do that, we will send you a $50 coupon for any of the Harmony Plus programs or services. So definitely take advantage of this great opportunity to get a coupon. Okay, I know I've talked for about an hour, but I guess we can maybe answer a few questions at this point.
Yes, we have about 10 questions. I'm afraid we don't have much time to finish them all, but let's get started. First one, for Common App, can one include more than one prompt in their essay?
So usually for the Common App, you do need to choose that one prompt and then write an essay about it. You can't really choose two. The only way you could kind of do that would be to do the last prompt that's, share an essay on any topic of your choice. Then you could kind of incorporate multiple, but it wouldn't be so obvious.
Okay, we have the second question. Can this essay bootcamp guarantee the completion of the application essays?
So we probably won't like 100% polish the essays, but students will have a very, very good draft of all of their essays. So we'll go through multiple drafts in the boot camp. So, some students might feel like they're ready to be totally done with their essays. Some students still might want to do a little last minute polishing, especially because we'll be finishing towards the end of August. So some students might want to revisit their essays in like September and October and just maybe revise a little bit more, but we'll have really, really solid drafts. So for some students, it might be complete.
And next question, we have what 10th graders should do to prepare for the essay for the future?
Yeah, so at this point, younger students can certainly take a look at the essay prompts and maybe even read some sample essays just to kind of familiarize themselves with what sorts of things colleges are asking students to write, and then seeing what older students have written for their college essays and what has worked. And after taking a look at those things, younger students, maybe they can even have a running list in their phones as well, just like with some ideas for personal statements. Another really important thing for younger students to do is also to just have experiences, have those life experiences, whether it's through extracurricular activities or just kind of putting yourself out there, like leading projects or whatever it is. Because in order to write good essays, let's be honest, like you need to do interesting things in your life. If you don't do anything interesting, it's going to be really hard to write your essays. So when you're younger, the number one most important thing is to really make yourself have those experiences, put yourself out there, get involved.
Is there one-to-one college instruction available during the boot camp?
Yes, there is. So in a few of the sessions, students will sometimes have like peer editing, and during the peer editing time, then I'll meet with students one-on-one. But then we can also kind of combine some packages as well. So like some students might sign up for the boot camp, but then they might add on a few hours of individual essay editing with me. That also works too. So yeah, no matter what, there'll be a bit of one-on-one essay editing. Also, I'll be giving students feedback after class every day. So, just like a teacher grades students' homework, I'll be looking at students' work and assignments, including like their essays every time. So in that way, it'll also be one-on-one.
Okay, I believe the next question is from a student asking, how do I find the right topic for my personal essay and how do I start writing?
Yeah, sure. So with that, it definitely can be hard to think about exactly which topic you're going to write about, especially if you've done a lot of things. So that's why I think those brainstorming exercises are really important. So going through worksheets, kind of like the student essay questionnaire that I take students through, because then you can, fill that out, take a few days to reflect, and then you can maybe talk to like parents, friends, and especially your college counselor, and then kind of think about the best idea or ideas that you can go with.
Let me jump to the next one. What can a recent junior do this summer?
Sure. So if a student is a rising junior, as I said before with the person who wanted to like learn more about what a 10th grader can do for essays, so really just have those experiences right now. So I would like really focus a lot on extracurricular activities, especially in whatever area the student wants to major in and pursue a career in the future. So it might be like doing a summer program at a university, doing some research, doing an internship. Things like that are all great, and those are potential experiences that students can write about in their college essays.
And we have another good question here asking how to elaborate stories to show personality and characters.
Sure. So I think a good strategy for this is to write down those adjectives or like those really important stories that you really want admissions officers to know. And then kind of figure out how to weave those into your personal statement or your other essays. So when you have things written down and you keep going back to those adjectives or those words, those keywords that you want to add, then you can really make sure that you're showing those unique characteristics about yourself.
Calla, we have more question coming, but I don't think we have enough time today. Maybe you can join our WeChat group, and our friends can ask more questions over there and have a deeper conversation because we have more and more questions coming and we just can't afford it.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
no
you can
worries.
show the QR code again, please.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so if you guys have more questions, definitely feel free to join our WeChat group and contact us, and then we can answer more questions individually.
Yeah, keep this page for a minute so they have the time to
Sure.
scan it. Okay. In the meanwhile, let's answer the last question. Is there any material that they should read about? Maybe anything on the air that they can watch or read?
Yeah, so we definitely take a look at some sample essays in the bootcamp. So I think that sort of thing helps, and also just watching webinars like this about the essay writing process, and also in the boot camps we go very in depth about how you should write your essays. So I think all of those materials can really help students write their essays.
And we have a follow-up question asking, will you provide the writing samples from previous students, the good ones, the bad ones, as examples they can learn from in the bootcamp?
Yes. Yep. We mostly take a look at good ones, but yes, we also have like a few sentences that are kind of like bad examples, like, okay, this is not a good sentence. Here's what you actually should write. So we go over all of that kind of stuff in the boot camp.
Okay, then I have to cut you here. And sorry, we didn't have time to finish all the questions, but thanks for coming. Maybe you can join our next webinar. It happens every week, every Saturday. And if you want to re-watch this video, you can always go to our Facebook page that you can see this recording again. And also welcome to join our WeChat group. You can have a deeper conversation and find our consultant over there. Otherwise, I have to call it a day, and thanks for coming.